1.4 Components of the PMBOK guide. Projects comprise several key components that, when effectively managed, result in their successful completion. This guide identifies and explains these components. The various components interrelate to each other during the management of a project. The key components are described briefly in Table 1.3. These components are more fully explained in the sections that follow the table. Please pay particular attention to this diagram because you can see that the first entry mentions a series of phases that the project passes through, and the second mentions project phases. However, the phases that the project passes through and project phases are two quite different things. They're not related despite the name. This catches a lot of people on the exam. The series of phases should really be called the series of stages or similar, because it means, for example, initiation phase, planning phase, and so on. But a project phase is more like a mini project within the main project. For example, if you are managing a project to build an office block, you might have a separate project phase to do the landscaping. It's within the main project but managed as a separate project. Component 1 of the PMBOK guide is the project life cycle. A project life cycle is a series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. You need to know that for the examination. It provides the basic framework for managing the project. This basic framework applies regardless of the specific project work involved. The phases may be sequential, iterative, i.e. you do them over and over again, or overlapping, i.e. you may do two at the same time, two or more at the same time. All projects can be mapped to the generic life cycle shown in figure 1.5, and please note that this generic life cycle appears on the exam now and then, so you need to memorize that. It's quite a simple thing to learn. And although in this diagram it's quite hard to see the forest for the trees, the generic life cycle is up at the top of the diagram, and you can see it's 1. Starting the project, 2. Organising and preparing, 3. Carrying out the work, 4. Ending the project. And in this section on life cycles, when you see the word phase, think of a stage such as those in the generic life cycle. Development life cycles can be predictive, iterative, incremental, adaptive, or a hybrid model. What does that mean? In a predictive life cycle, the project scope, time and cost are determined in the early phases of the life cycle. The word predictive means being able to predict or to see ahead, because you're trying to predict everything in detail right from the start of the project, which is the time when you know the least about it. It's also referred to as a waterfall life cycle because it's like walking down a flight of stairs, but you can't go back up the stairs again. And so it's like taking a canoe over a series of waterfalls. In an iterative life cycle, the project scope is generally determined early in the project life cycle, but time and cost estimates are routinely modified as the project team's understanding of the product increases. Iterations develop the project through a series of repeated cycles, while increments successfully add to the functionality of the product. And so here you are acknowledging that trying to predict everything in detail right from the start of the project when you know the least about it is probably not the best way to do it. And so in an iterative life cycle, you're treating the project more like an experiment, which in many cases, especially in information technology projects, that's exactly what it is. In an incremental life cycle, the deliverable is produced through a series of iterations that successfully add functionality within a predetermined time frame. The deliverable contains the necessary and sufficient capability to be considered complete only after the final iteration. This one reminds me of the old riddle, how can you eat a whole elephant? Answer, 1 bite at a time. Adaptive life cycles are agile, iterative or incremental. The detailed scope is defined and approved before the start of one iteration. Adaptive life cycles are also referred to as agile or change-driven life cycles. This type of life cycle is fast moving, and though it's far removed from the waterfall, when you're managing an adaptive life cycle project, it can feel like you're in that little canoe plummeting over a waterfall. A hybrid life cycle is a combination of predictive and adaptive life cycle. These elements of the project that are well known or have fixed requirements follow a predictive development life cycle, and those elements that are still evolving follow an adaptive development life cycle. It's up to the project management team, not just the project manager, to determine the best life cycle for each project. The project life cycle needs to be flexible enough to deal with the variety of factors included in the project. Life cycle flexibility may be accomplished by identifying the process or processes needed to be performed at each phase, performing the process or processes identified in the appropriate phase, adjusting the various attributes of a phase, the example name, duration, exit criteria and entrance criteria. Project life cycles are independent of product life cycles which may be produced by a project. A product life cycle is a series of phases that represent the evolution of the product from concept through delivery, growth, maturity and to its eventual end of life or retirement. For example, a project life cycle to develop the first Concorde supersonic aircraft took about 8 years, but the product life cycle was about 46 years. That's 8 years of development plus 38 years until retired from service. However, I noticed recently that one Concorde has been bought by a group of businessmen who are hoping to put it back into service, and so the product life cycle might end up a lot longer than the 46 years. Project phase. The PMBOK guide says a project phase is a collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the completion of one or more deliverables. The phases in a life cycle can be described by a variety of attributes. Attributes may be measurable and unique to a specific phase. Attributes may include the name, for example, phase A, phase B, phase 1, phase 2, proposal phase, numbering, e.g. 3 phases in the project, 5 phases in the project, duration, example, 1 week, 1 month, 1 quarter, resource requirements, e.g. people, buildings, equipment, entrance criteria for a project to move into that phase, e.g. specified approvals documents, specified documents completed, and exit criteria for a project to complete a phase, e.g. documented approvals, completed documents, completed deliverables. Projects may be separated into distinct phases or subcomponents. These phases or subcomponents are generally given names that indicate the type of work done in that phase. You can find a list of typical phase names on page 20 of the PMBOK guide, but they could include names such as build, test, transition, etc. Decision points, example funding, project go, no go, and milestone review. Number 3, phase gate. This is where you check the project performance at the end of a phase and management decides if the project should continue. You can read more about this on page 21 of the PMBOK guide. 4, project management processes. The project life cycle is managed by executing a series of project management activities known as project management processes. Every project management process produces one or more outputs from one or more inputs by using appropriate project management tools and techniques. And you will find that we'll actually be spending most of the rest of this course on processes with their inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. The output can be a deliverable or an outcome. Outcomes are an end result of a process. Project management processes apply globally across industries. Project management processes are logically linked by the outputs they produce. Processes may contain overlapping activities that occur throughout the project. The output of one process generally results in either an input to another process or a deliverable of the project or project phase. The number of process iterations and interactions between processes varies based on the needs of the project. Processes generally fall into one of three categories. Processes used once or at predetermined points in the project. The processes develop project charter and close project or phase are good examples of that. Processes that are performed periodically as needed. The processes acquire resources is performed as resources are needed. The process conduct procurements is performed prior to needing the procured item. Processes that are performed continually throughout the project. The process define activity may occur throughout the project lifecycle, especially if the project uses rolling wave planning or an adaptive development approach. Many of the monitoring and controlling processes are ongoing from the start of the project until it is closed out. Project management is accomplished through the appropriate application and integration of logically grouped project management processes. While there are different ways of grouping processes, the PMBOK guide groups processes into 5 categories called process groups. Okay, starting with project management process group. It's logical grouping of project management processes to achieve specific project objectives. Process groups are independent of project phases. Project management processes are grouped into the following 5 project management business groups. Initiating process group. Those processes performed to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project by obtaining authorization to start the project or phase. Planning process group. The processes required to establish the scope of the project, refine the objectives and define the course of action required to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. Executing process group. Those processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy project requirements. And just a reminder, as I've said a couple of times so far, and we'll cover in more detail later, the project plan is not the project schedule. A project plan is a collection of 18 plans which includes a project schedule. Monitoring and controlling process group. Those processes required to track, review and regulate the progress and performance of the project, identify any areas in which changes to the plan are required and initiate the corresponding changes. Closing process group. Those processes performed to formally complete or close the project, phase or contract. And all those definitions for the 5 process groups are important for the examination. Process flow diagrams are used throughout the guide. The project management processes are linked by specific inputs and outputs where the result of or outcome of one process may become the input to another process that is not necessarily in the same process group. Note that process groups are not the same as project phases. Number 6, project management knowledge areas. In addition to the process groups, processes are also categorized by knowledge areas, and it is these knowledge areas that we're going to spend most of the time on the course. And each one of the knowledge areas will be divided into a number of processes. You'll find there's a separate module for each area, each knowledge area, each containing a set of lessons. And I have aligned the numbering of the modules and lessons with the PMBOK guide numbering to make it pretty easy to hop between one and the other. But something to be very wary of is that a lot of the knowledge areas appear in sequence in the PMBOK guide contents page, which appears to be a logical sequence. They are in fact used in almost any order. They overlap, they're interdependent, and they may be repeated many times. Now let's look at the 10 knowledge areas, and I've included the PMBOK definition of each one, as you'll need to know these, or at least recognize these in the examination. 1. Project integration management. includes the processes and activities to identify, define, combine, unify and coordinate the various processes and project management activities within the project management process groups. This is the knowledge area where the project manager operates, because the project management role is integrative by nature. The remaining knowledge areas are the domain of various specialists and technical experts such as financial, risk and scheduling experts, etc. But project integration management is center stage for project manager. Number 2, project scope management includes the processes required to ensure the project includes all of the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. And that is one of the most common definitions on the examination. Number 3, project schedule management includes the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. This knowledge area has been renamed in the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide. Previously it was known as project time management, but the PMI review committee suggested that time can't be changed. It is only the processes that can be changed inside the time, because time always progresses at a constant rate no matter what you do. Personally, I think this is changing words just for the sake of changing words, but you need to know it for the examination. Number 4, project cost management includes the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing and controlling costs so the project can be completed within the approved budget. Number 5, project quality management includes the processes for incorporating the organization's quality policy regarding planning, managing and controlling project and product quality requirements in order to make stakeholder expectations. And just reminding you, these definitions are all important for the examination. Number 6, project resource management includes the processes to identify, acquire and manage the resources needed for the successful completion of the project. This knowledge area changed with the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide. It's not just a name change or big changes into it. Previously it was called Project Human Resource Management, but in this edition it has been expanded to include all physical resources as well as the team resources. Number 7, project communications management includes the processes required to ensure timely and appropriate planning, collection, creation, distribution, storage, retrieval, management, control, monitoring and ultimate disposition of project information. Now I'm not sure about that word disposition. Maybe it means something different in America than from the rest of the world, but that actually means the disposal of the information. It's quite often business information has to be kept by law, but usually it's written in the law that after a certain number of years that information could then be disposed of or destroyed. 8, project risk management includes the processes of conducting risk management planning, identification, analysis, response planning, response implementation and monitoring risk on a project. Knowledge area number 9, project procurement management, includes the processes necessary to purchase or acquire products, services or results needed from outside the project team. Number 10, project stakeholder management, includes the processes required to identify the people, groups or organizations that could impact or be impacted by the project, to analyze stakeholder expectations and their impact on the project, and to develop appropriate management strategies to effectively engage stakeholders in project management decisions and execution. Please study Table 1.4, which maps the project management process groups and knowledge areas. And I mean, study this in detail many times. It is really important. It will answer a lot of questions for you, and it'll answer a lot of questions on the examination. And you'll find this on page 25 of the PMBOK guide. And that brings us to the end of components of the PMBOK guide. The next module is tailoring. Please read the corresponding chapter in the PMBOK guide before watching the video so that you can tailor your studies.